Hollywood's earliest years were a war zone, and no army fought harder than the church. Before the Hollywood Code locked down the silver screen, studios dared to unleash films that shocked pulpits, drove bishops into action, and brought entire communities to their knees, sometimes literally in protest. These weren't just movies. They were battles in the war over America's soul. These are 11 pre-code films that made the church seethe with outrage, sparked picket lines, and forced Hollywood to face a reckoning that would change everything. Let's pull back the curtain on the films that made the church roar. The Sign of the Cross, 1932. When Cecil B. DeMille released The Sign of the Cross, he didn't just make a biblical epic. He launched a firestorm that would reshape the relationship between Hollywood and the church for decades. Set in Nero's decadent Rome, the film was filled with spectacle, wild banquets, gladiatorial violence, and scenes of forbidden pleasure that left 1930s audiences shocked and many religious leaders furious. But it was Claudette Colbert's now legendary milk bath scene that pushed things beyond the breaking point. The film's lavish depictions of pagan festivities, suggestive dances, and scenes of peril for early Christians became targets for the newly formed National Catholic Office for Motion Pictures, soon to become the Catholic Legion of Decency. Priests took to the pulpit, urging parishioners to avoid the film, with one Chicago bishop calling it an insult to decency and faith. The outrage was not limited to the Sunday sermon. Catholic newspapers across the country ran scathing editorials warning about the dangers of seeing such indecent spectacles. The Legion of Decency gave the movie its harshest condemnation, denouncing it for glorifying immorality and mocking sacred history. In response, some theaters removed the most controversial sequences, and DeMille was forced to recut the film for many regions. Nevertheless, the full version was so popular that it played to packed houses, proving that controversy sells, but also that church opposition could make headlines. The backlash from The Sign of the Cross directly contributed to the full enforcement of the Hollywood Production Code in 1934. It stands as the poster child for the era, the film that religious leaders pointed to as proof that Hollywood had run amok. Today, it remains a vivid reminder of how one movie's mixture of pageantry and provocation could unite the faithful in outrage and leave an indelible mark on American film history. Ecstasy, 1933. Ecstasy was never meant for a quiet release. This Czechoslovakian import starring a young Hedy Lamarr became a cause célèbre and a lightning rod for church outrage the moment it was smuggled into American theaters. The story, focusing on a woman trapped in a cold marriage and her search for genuine connection, might have flown under the radar, if not for its infamous lake scene, which became one of the most debated moments in cinema history. Church groups responded swiftly and with force. The National Catholic Office for Motion Pictures publicly condemned the film, labeling it an affront to decency and virtue. Catholic leaders across America declared that Ecstasy was unfit for any Christian audience, warning that the film promoted values contrary to faith and family. In cities like Boston and Philadelphia, Catholic action groups and the newly organized Legion of Decency staged pickets and letter-writing campaigns demanding local officials ban the film outright. Even after severe edits were made, removing the film's most controversial scenes, church opposition continued. Parishes distributed leaflets, newspapers called for a total boycott, and in some cases, the clergy threatened excommunication for those who defied the ban. In many areas, the film was banned for years. Even when it did finally screen, it was only in heavily truncated form. The fury over Ecstasy was so intense that it changed the way foreign films were imported, previewed, and censored in America. It was cited in sermons and morality campaigns well into the 1940s as an example of European corruption. The church's all-out war on the film became the model for how religious groups could mobilize to control what was seen and what was not on American screens. Ann Vickers, 1933. Ann Vickers, based on Sinclair Lewis's novel and starring Irene Dunne, might seem tame by modern standards. But in 1933, it became ground zero for a new kind of church outrage. The film's heroine is a progressive reformer, determined to bring justice to prisons, and even more shockingly for the time, to her own personal life. Her story includes relationships outside marriage and the hard choices that follow, all handled with a frankness that was rare even for pre-code Hollywood. The Catholic Legion of Decency and Protestant reformers wasted no time condemning Ann Vickers. Editorials warned that the film subverts the Christian order of society and set a dangerous precedent by portraying an unmarried woman making decisions for herself without shame or regret. Across the Midwest, Catholic bishops coordinated public campaigns urging parishioners to boycott the movie. And in several cities, priests read statements at Sunday Mass warning that attendance was a grave moral danger. In major cities like New York, Boston, and Chicago, religious protests contributed to bans, edits, and restricted showings. Studio memos from RKO reveal that executives tried to appease church leaders with alternate endings and promises of moral lessons. But the Legion of Decency was unmoved, issuing the film its condemned rating. The uproar solidified the Legion's power as Hollywood's new guardian of morality. Ann Vickers ultimately became a touchstone in church versus Hollywood history, the movie that made it clear that religious groups could and would control what audiences could see simply by raising their voices and organizing at the box office. Babyface, 1933. No film is more synonymous with pre-code controversy than Babyface, starring Barbara Stanwyck as Lily Powers, a woman who climbs from poverty to power by boldly defying every social rule. With its unblinking depiction of ambition and unapologetic self-advancement, the film immediately drew the church's ire for what leaders described as a roadmap to moral ruin. The Catholic Legion of Decency denounced Babyface in their earliest statements, placing it on their condemned list and calling it a danger to the morals of the nation's youth. Priests delivered sermons warning parents about the film's celebration of sin, and in some dioceses, parish bulletins carried warnings that viewing the film could constitute a near occasion of serious wrongdoing. Church-led outrage forced Warner Brothers to delay the movie's release, recut several key scenes, and even shoot a new ending where Lily repents. Studio correspondence shows frantic efforts to convince religious leaders that the film's lesson was ultimately virtuous, but church authorities saw right through it, insisting that the mere presence of Lily's actions was harmful. Despite all the edits, Babyface became an underground sensation. Its notoriety and the church's fierce opposition drew crowds who wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Ultimately, the controversy over Babyface became a central argument in favor of strict production code enforcement, making it one of the most significant films in the church's crusade for censorship. It remains a classic not just for Stanwyck's legendary performance, but for the firestorm it ignited in every pulpit and pew. The Story of Temple Drake, 1933. Adapted from William Faulkner's lurid novel Sanctuary, The Story of Temple Drake is one of the most notorious films in the history of church-driven censorship. The story follows Temple, a Southern socialite whose life spirals into danger and scandal after a night gone wrong. The film's unfiltered look at vice, corruption, and the blurred lines between innocence and guilt made it a lightning rod for religious condemnation. From the moment word got out that Paramount was adapting Sanctuary, church leaders mobilized. The National Catholic Office for Motion Pictures condemned the project before it was even released, warning that it would bring shame upon all who view it. When the film premiered, bishops and priests across the South delivered sermons denouncing it as an insult to faith and decency. In New Orleans, priests organized pickets and lobbied city officials to ban the movie outright, a tactic that proved successful in several southern and Midwestern cities. The Catholic Legion of Decency gave Temple Drake its most severe rating, and in cities where it did play, ticket sales were driven by the very outrage the church tried to suppress. The controversy grew so intense that Paramount withdrew the film from circulation, making it nearly impossible to see for decades. Scholars now cite Temple Drake as a direct catalyst for the code's harshest enforcement and a textbook example of how the church could put Hollywood in a chokehold when sufficiently provoked. Call Her Savage, 1932. Clara Bow's comeback film Call Her Savage did not tread lightly. Bow's character, Nasa Springer, blazed through a world of barroom brawls, family secrets, and rebellious choices that upended every expectation of womanhood. For church leaders, the film was a moral earthquake, a story that reveled in breaking taboos and then refused to offer easy repentance or redemption. From its opening weeks, the Catholic press decried the film as a festival of vice, and the Legion of Decency issued a rare call for complete avoidance. Editorials in religious papers across the country warned parents to keep their children far from theaters showing the film. In cities like Chicago, priests led public rallies demanding local censors pull the movie, and in several states, the church successfully pressured officials to cut or ban it outright. Studio records show that Fox executives tried to claim the film ultimately preached a moral lesson, but correspondence with religious leaders reveals the church was unmoved. Catholic bulletins labeled Beau's character as a danger to the public conscience, and some bishops even threatened excommunication for parishioners who openly defied warnings. The uproar surrounding Call Her Savage set a precedent. No matter how popular a film might be, church condemnation could tarnish its reputation, drive away audiences, and force changes from even the most powerful studios. The movie's notoriety remains a testament to just how much power religious outrage wielded in the golden age of American cinema. Search for Beauty, 1934. If Search for Beauty is remembered at all today, it's for the headlines it created among church groups and censors. Marketed as a comedy about fitness and health, the film quickly drew fire for what church leaders saw as little more than an excuse for showing athletic young people in a variety of revealing poses and group routines. Buster Crabbe and Ida Lupino might have been the stars, but it was the cast of extras, parading, swimming, and exercising with abandon that raised the most eyebrows. The Catholic Legion of Decency denounced the film as an offense to Christian modesty. In cities with large Catholic populations, parish bulletins and Sunday sermons included warnings that Search for Beauty was unfit for viewing by the faithful. Church-affiliated newspapers ran editorials claiming the film promoted a culture of immodesty and disregard for proper conduct. Priests led boycotts, and in some cities, pickets formed outside theaters on opening night. Paramount's efforts to mollify church leaders with edits and reassurances met with little success. Internal memos show the studio removed entire sequences for some markets, but the Legion refused to remove its condemnation. By the summer of 1934, the church's campaign was so successful that the film was effectively pulled from screens in dozens of cities. Search for Beauty is now cited by historians as a case study in how the church used its influence not just to criticize, but to actively remove films it deemed inappropriate, helping usher in the strict era of the Hollywood production code. Red-Headed Woman, 1932. Jean Harlow's star turn as Lil Andrews in Red-Headed Woman was as provocative as any role of the early 1930s. Lil is unapologetic in her pursuit of married men, ambition, and self-interest, never showing regret and never facing punishment for her actions. For many in the church, this wasn't just a matter of storytelling, but an outright attack on the foundations of marriage and morality. The Catholic Legion of Decency placed Red-Headed Woman on its blacklist almost immediately, issuing statements warning that the film was an affront to Christian family values. Priests from Boston to Los Angeles used their pulpits to preach against the movie, calling it a blueprint for vice. Religious newspapers urged a boycott, and in some Catholic schools, students were threatened with disciplinary action if they attended a screening. Despite attempts by MGM to soften the film with alternate endings and edited scenes, the controversy persisted. Church-led pressure was instrumental in restricting the film's release in several regions, and the furor made Red-Headed Woman one of the most talked about and most condemned films of its time. Its legacy is a vivid reminder that Hollywood's fun could come at a steep cost when the church chose to fight back. Scarface, 1932. Scarface, directed by Howard Hawks, is often remembered for its violence and style, but for the church, its real sin was glamorizing crime and failing to deliver a moral message. Paul Mooney's portrayal of Tony Camonte, a ruthless gangster, is energetic and intense, but church leaders saw the film as a dangerous endorsement of lawlessness, greed, and disrespect for authority. The Catholic Legion of Decency issued a strong condemnation, arguing that the film erodes respect for law, order, and the family. Religious newspapers ran editorials warning that the film would inspire young men to pursue crime as a glamorous lifestyle. In cities with strong church presence, parish leaders lobbied local officials to ban the movie or demand heavy edits. Some priests even staged protests outside theaters, holding prayer vigils, and passing out flyers about the dangers of attending. In response to the uproar, United Artists added a moralistic prologue and epilogue to the film, warning viewers about the dangers of a life of crime. But church leaders were not satisfied. In some places, Scarface was banned for years. The controversy helped shape public perception of Hollywood as an industry in need of outside control, and gave the church another victory in its campaign for moral oversight. The Bitter Tea of General Yen, 1933. Frank Capra's The Bitter Tea of General Yen was revolutionary for its depiction of an interracial relationship and for questioning faith, morality, and loyalty. Barbara Stanwyck's character, a missionary, falls under the spell of the enigmatic General Yen, an emotional journey that, in its time, crossed every boundary of race and religion. The church response was swift and negative. The Catholic Legion of Decency labeled the film dangerous and unfit for any Christian audience. Catholic and Protestant leaders both objected to scenes set in brothels, depictions of religious doubt, and the suggestion that faith could be compromised by human longing. In several cities, priests sent letters to parishioners urging them to avoid the film, and some organized boycotts that resulted in the film's early withdrawal from local theaters. Capra himself later recalled the hostility he faced from church groups and the difficulty in finding screens for his film in Catholic neighborhoods. The furor over The Bitter Tea of General Yen proved that the church's definition of scandal included not just physicality, but any challenge to traditional faith and social boundaries. The Blue Angel, 1930, U.S. release 1931. The Blue Angel, though a German film, became one of the first foreign imports to spark a major church-led controversy in America. Marlene Dietrich's Lola Lola, a cabaret singer whose relationship with a proper schoolmaster leads to his downfall, was viewed as an open assault on respectability, morality, and authority. Church leaders quickly condemned the film's themes of temptation and disgrace. The Catholic press described The Blue Angel as corrosive to public morals and a mockery of virtue and authority. In Catholic cities, parish bulletins and diocesan newspapers published warnings, and some churches even urged parishioners to boycott all theaters showing the film. Public protests in places like Boston and New York forced some exhibitors to pull the movie after only a few days. The Blue Angel helped set the template for future battles between foreign films and American moral guardians. Its combination of spectacle, emotion, and challenge to tradition made it a favorite example for sermons against the dangers of un-American entertainment. The outrage it provoked proved that the church's influence wasn't just local or national, but global, and that Hollywood would need to think twice before importing any film that might offend. There you have it, 11 pre-code movies that did more than make headlines. They ignited protests, forced bans, and helped shape a new age of strict film censorship. Each was a battleground in the war between art and morality, studio and pulpit. Which film surprised you most? Drop your pick in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into Hollywood's wildest years, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes, the stories that spark the most outrage end up changing history forever.